back with another episode of On the Record with Tiffany and my special guest, Laura Thompson, the fierce, the feisty, the magnificent Laura Thompson, creator of TAAN TV.
The African-American Network, where we have a local feel with a global reach.
With a global reach.
Yes, and it's, you added an M, it's fierce, feisty, fabulous, friendly, phenomenal.
Okay, sorry. Phenomenal. Phenomenal, Laura Thompson. I love having you.
Apparently, yes.
Be quiet. Now, see what I have to put up with? This is what dealing with these network heads, leaders of major networks, happens to yield you, right?
I think it's just in my genes.
Running things and making things, making the world a better place. So, Laura, what are you doing now that is changing the world? I heard a little birdie told me you're doing some new stuff. Well,
okay. We've been doing this for on our current platform for a couple of years, and so we're just doing fine tuning and kind of putting processes in place to make all this money that we're getting ready to make.
And this is on the AfricanAmerican Network television.
Yeah, where we have a local feel
with a global reach.
How about that? But one of the things that our very first project was 300 Voices in 300 Days. And that was a project to incorporate the African American voice into the tricentennial celebration for San Antonio, which happened a few years ago. So San Antonio celebrated 300 years of existence. So that's pretty cool, right? So I knew that, African Americans were a part of San Antonio back during that time. But also, throughout the history of San Antonio, African Americans have made, significant contributions. And so I wanted to ensure that African Americans had a voice during that time. So we set a date. We interviewed close to 300 people in about 6 months.
Wow. So how did you pick the people that you were interviewing?
I know some of them. Some were recommendations. I like to pick the people because I pick people that I know work and that have made contributions. And I know that some people have made contributions and nobody would ever pick them. And so
contributions nobody really knows about,
right? Or they may know about them, but they just may not think that they're I won't say worthy, but they might not think that they're in a certain class of people in order to get that recognition. And so we interviewed people from all walks of life, all the way from the CEO of CPS Energy to the second African American to graduate from St. Mary's University Law School, and he was the first municipal judge in San Antonio, and he just passed away a couple of years ago. But people like that.
Wow.
And also people that have been incarcerated, gotten out, and have become successful. So we just ran the gamut of people in San Antonio that are African American that were making significant contributions.
I love the fact that you looked across the spectrum at people and didn't just stick with the elite or the person that's made all the newspapers, or you went all through SA and found different levels of contribution.
Right. Well, we've created these titles for ourselves. And so some elite means that you're in a certain class, or inner city, dictates that you're in a certain class. But I just look at people as people. All people are capable of doing great things. So,
when I think about myself, I fall into both of those, inner city and elite. Like there are some people that would say the elite part, and then when I think of me, I think of the inner city part, the girl that grew up right down from the projects. That's the part I always think of. You know,
Right.
so I'm big on not putting a label on people because you don't know somebody else's story.
Right. I mean, everybody has a story. They just don't tell it. So
That's right.
or it just hasn't
You
been
do.
it
You
just
tell the
hasn't been
story.
exposed. Everybody has a story that they're proud of, and they may have stories that they're not so proud of. But sometimes people forget as they level up. They forget, and so I don't. And
That's the nice part.
I remind people that everybody has contributions to make. And they do. They have them and they do.
So what were your top 3 most memorable stories that you thought, wow, I didn't know there was so much to this story?
There was a guy that he went to prison at a young age, got out, turned his life around, and now he's working with the FBI. As a matter of fact, he's working with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He got a really high level position with them.
Wow.
And so he's just the nicest guy, personable, and I think that's what happens to some of our African American men. They're very personable, very handsome, very charming, and so they get scooped up, by people that use their talents, and they not necessarily for the good, so they end up, getting in trouble and getting incarcerated. But if they come out and they make a decision that they're gonna go and take a different path, they can be very successful. And that story, I didn't know I knew him. I didn't know he had been incarcerated. I just, he was just a cool person. So I knew him. I didn't know he had been incarcerated, so I learned that. And then later on, after the interview, he was in the newspaper where he had gotten this position with the FBI.
Wow.
So that's pretty ironic.
I think that's an incredible story because it's a hopeful story. Like you can, at any point in your life, you can turn your life around.
And then another one, you said 3, so I'm going to try to think of 3. So the other one was Clarence McGowan. He was the first African-American municipal judge. And he was the second to graduate from St. Mary's University. Prior to that, he was a teacher at Wheatley High School, which was predominantly African-American back during his time. And so he decided to go to law school because he said he could help his people better, if he was an attorney. The other thing about him is that he owned a lot of the property on the East Side. He was the first African American to be allowed to buy property on the East Side in San Antonio, because they had a law that says that
we couldn't
buy property. And so there was an Anglo guy that helped him to get this property. He said, they're not going to let me buy property. And he said, yeah, they are. And so he owned the property where the H-E-B grocery store is on Houston Street. He owned all of that, a lot of the property on New Braunfels, where there's, businesses and business parks. So I didn't know that about him. I knew that he was an attorney, and I knew that he was a judge, but I didn't know his story behind why he became a judge and all that stuff. And
he changed the game for Black people in owning property.
And then he won cases where they wouldn't allow African Americans to buy property, and with just one little, I forgot what the clause was, but it was just one little thing that
he got changed.
It was one little thing that helped him to win the case.
Wow.
And so he won that case. And so when you win those cases, of course, they go down, people can look back at them and say, okay, if they have a similar case, when he won this case, back in the day. So
So
he can
he
win it
set that
again.
case law
Mm-hmm.
for what was to come, and people build on it. Even people built on it from there.
Mm-hmm. And then the other one was Paula Gore Williams, the CEO. She's about to be the former CEO of CPS Energy, but she grew up on the East Side. Her mother was best friends with my aunt. They lived next door to each other. I didn't know that. I was like, why is she always waving and talking to me like she knows me?
Well, that's why.
but she went through the ranks at CPS Energy when it was City Public Service. Mm-hmm. She went through the ranks and moved up to CEO, which I think is a phenomenal accomplishment.
Yes.
So, those are some of the three of the stories that kind of stand out. Several people have passed away since we did the book. Allison Rance, he was an NFL player, and he was president of the retired NFL Association, something like that. I forgot the name of the organization. But we interviewed him, and 2 weeks later he passed away. He was supposed to have a heart transplant, and it went bad. Oh. And so he passed away in the operating room. So, but people like that, like Spot Barnett, this is, I can just go on and on. Spot Barnett passed away, but he was a jazz saxophonist. Never really reached the prominence or the ranks that he should have or could have. But he played with people like Count Basie and Etta James. Some of the blues greats.
And right here in San Antonio.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like you've been keeping up with San Antonio history before we even had a SACAM to keep up with San Antonio history.
Yeah. Well, I'm one of the reasons why they can a museum can be in existence because that history has already been captured and it just donated. Well, I bequested a lot of stuff to SACAM. 300 Voices is just one of the projects.
So what else have you given to SACAM? There's 300 Voices. Like if the reason why I'm always dragging you back up here to On the Record with Tiffany is because
you're trying to put it on the record.
Is because you've done so many historic things here in San Antonio. Just one of those things, like 300 Voices, recording that would be a lifetime achievement for just about anybody else's career. And that's like one of 60 things you've done.
But people at the TV stations and stuff, they was like, wow, we couldn't do 300 in 3 or 4 years. Yeah, you could. Yeah, you could. You just have to schedule them, get the people to interview them. And we had different people that volunteered to interview them for the project. We did our first 3 or 4. We tried to do them ourselves, and a production team came in and offered us a good deal, and so they did all of them, and we did, as many as 20 every Saturday. We would do like maybe 12 to 20 people every Saturday, and so we had a full house every Saturday. We fed everyone. We everybody waited, and they networked and had an opportunity to meet each other and hear each other's stories. So it was just a really exciting time, and that was our first major project. Well, the first project period for TAAN TV.
Wow! So you had all of this diverse group of people with amazing accomplishments, and they all checked their egos or whatever at the door and networked and waited so that they could record our history here.
Yep.
And that's pretty cool.
So it's been an exciting run. That's one of the projects that I worked on. I'm always thinking of these projects and say, what was I thinking? But for I think it was 8 or 9 years, I did MLK and Black History Month campaign where I had 100 billboards scattered across the city doing to promote MLK and his accomplishments, and then different Black History events or organizations in February. So from January to February, we had 100 billboards all over the city.
Wow, and that hadn't been done. Nobody had done 100 billboards.
I've worked with agencies, and they say, heck, we haven't done that many. But altogether, it was about maybe 700 or 800 billboards over those years.
And that has to have something to do with the reason why we have the largest MLK walk.
No, that happened before then. I just kind of thought that we should have some kind of, big splash.
Where it's publicized.
Mm-hmm. And the billboard campaign talked about the history, like Reverend R.A. Callis started the march with his family, and then the city started the commission. So the march itself is actually more than 35 years, but the San Antonio Martin Luther King Commission has run it for 35 years, so that's why it's the 35th anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been over 50 years.
Wow. Like San Antonio has held a prominent position in the African American experience in the United States. And we talked about it with SACAM a little bit, but the fact that you're archiving it, that you have done that digitally. So now, as SACAM gets this together, gets 300 voices together, we're going to be able to see into perpetuity.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're getting 300 voices together. They're getting the who's who in Black San Antonio. I brought that to San Antonio. Fought tooth and nail. I always had to fight. They look at San Antonio as not a market where African Americans reside, and so I have to tell them that even if it's 100,000 people is a significant amount of people. There are cities that don't have 100,000 people in them. So, I have to remind them that because even with the Who's Who book, people in San Antonio said that'll never happen,
and it did.
And I said it is going to happen. Y'all might not participate in it, and then so some of them came to the first unveiling of the Who's Who book, and they were like, God darn it, my letter's still on my desk. And I said, well, maybe you can catch us next time.
But the Who's Who was incredibly popular. Mm-hmm. Like that was...
people want me to bring that back. They want me to bring Sisters in Business back.
Yes. I talked to you about bringing Sisters in Business back a few minutes ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Sisters in Business had a 10-year run. We brought in a lot of national speakers. We had what we call a Power Sister Speaking Series. And we would have 3 national speakers and 1 local speaker 4 months in a row. So, and wow. Some people said that'll never happen. It did.
It's going to happen. You've been a force behind it. And I love the fact that you're always so chill and relaxed, but you're a force to be reckoned with. You've been a force behind making new things happen and innovations in the African American community in San Antonio. Mm-hmm.
Well, Sisters in Business, we started that organization. Well, they didn't want to call it sisters. Number one, a couple of people didn't want to call us sisters. And then...
Why?
They didn't... I did things when it wasn't popular to do things for African Americans. Even with my agency, I said my name is Laura Thompson with Laura Thompson Agency. My primary focus is the African American market. And I say that everywhere. Mm-hmm. And people were like, you shouldn't say that. Yeah, I should.
I'm going to say
I just said it already. I can't take it. I'm not taking it back. So, it's fun to look back at all of this stuff because the archive is at SACAM is just once he started looking at it, he was like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
wow. And I did too. I'm like, wow, what? Like I have 55,000 files on an old hard drive.
55,000.
Mm-hmm. And we've been going through it, and he said, what about this project? I said, I have no idea. Some stuff I didn't even remember. But the bigger projects, I do. I always wanted to do bigger projects
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't want people, number one, to duplicate it. I wanted them to have to fight to duplicate it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw other, organizations and groups and ethnicities do large projects, and so I said we can do large projects too. And so I think that it helped to expand the minds of the people that were involved in those projects to see that those things are possible. Because right now, there's a lot of African American organizations popping up. Even with Sisters in Business, there was a lady out of Austin, Rose Smith, I think.
Mm-hmm.
She was saying, I want to start a Sisters in Business in Austin. And I said, okay, we can do that. But then she ended up starting Black Women in Business.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that organization is about maybe 8 or 9 years old. When we were ending, when we were doing the 10th year celebration, she was starting Black Women in Business. And so she was inspired by Sisters in Business. A bunch of people they called us from all across the country to see about setting up a chapter. But the board didn't have the vision, and they was like, we're not ready. I said, but they're ready.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And that's you, always a visionary, even when others can't see. The only difficulty in being a visionary is that often other people can't see what the next steps are. You can see it clearly.
Mm-hmm. And that's okay. That's not my problem.
That's right.
That they can't see it.
That's right. And we've been chatting with Laura Thompson, visionary, creator of TAAN TV, where we have a local feel with a global reach. And it's here on my home channel, 9:30 a.m. The Answer. Thank you, Laura, for talking with us. And we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about what's going on TAAN and what we're doing next.